What's up guys, Excalibur here and welcome back to Star Ocean Anamnesis. So today we'll be finishing up the Brave Exvius collab with Lasswell. So one final time, let's get started with the guide. For being a free character, Lasswell is actually incredibly good. His first talent, Tranquil Spirit, increases attack of the entire party by 30% or by 45% for every ally using short-range weapons. 45% is actually one of the highest attack buffs that we have now, and considering that most of the time you're going to be running him in a physical party and most physical characters use close-range weaponry, you could see that as a 45% attack increase. So like I said, that's actually pretty good. And then his second talent, Dependable Honor Student, nullifies the movement rate reduction field for all short-range weapon allies. So these are the blue fields that certain bosses can spawn, and they're actually quite annoying, so having a character that can nullify them is pretty useful. And then his third talent, Heir to the Blade, reduces his AP cost by 40% when he's sitting at a 3 skill chain or more. This allows Lasswell to extend his combos and do a bit more damage that way. Unfortunately, his damage is kind of average, or his damage output is kind of average, but it still helps. And then his last talent, Undying Effort, increases his movement rate by 20%. Being a blade and sheath character, he's actually quite slow, and this does help him out a little bit, but regardless, he's still a little slow. A little too slow for my liking, at least. And now moving on to his battle skills, first up we have Exercising Storm. Unleashes Storm of Ice upon your foe. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 170%, it does 5 hits, costs 17 AP, and it has an ice element. This is a really fast attack, doesn't cost that much AP, so you can use it to start your combos, or you could even use it to finish your combo to, I guess, mitigate end lag. It's pretty good overall. And then up next we have Tranquility. Unleashes Shockwave at your foe. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 250%, does only 1 hit, and it costs 20 AP. This attack is also pretty good because you can use it from range and it doesn't cost that much AP either. And then up next we have Mirror of Haze. Raise your foe skyward and smash them into the ground. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 250%, does 2 hits, and it also costs 20 AP. So this is kind of the smackdown attack, and stat-wise it's exactly the same as Tranquility, but Tranquility can be used from range, making it a bit more useful. This one does have 1 more hit, but that's not really gonna matter, so usually I recommend running Tranquility over this. And then we have Blade Flash. Awakened. Hit your foe and unleash a beam of light. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 450%, it does 5 hits, costs 35 AP, and it has an ice element. This attack is quite unique. So first he thrusts at the enemy, and then he jumps backwards and he spawns this ball of electricity on top of his target, and that continuously damages them. It's pretty good, and the fact that he retreats while he does it is also incredible. It just takes a little while, so you might have to use this on a stationary target. And then lastly we have his Rush. Azure Sky. Pierce your foe with a frozen sword. Its power is determined by multiplying attack by 3500%, has an ice element, and as a post-rush buff it increases the entire party's damage dealt by 30% for 20 seconds. Lasswell's attack stat is not particularly high, but against bosses that are weak to ice, he can still do some good damage because of that 3500% multiplier, so don't sleep on this Rush. And then something else that's pretty unique is that it has a 30% damage dealt increase for the entire party, and this is on an attacker. Usually it's only the sharpshooters that have the damage increases, so you can make some interesting parties with this. Unfortunately, if you're playing in public lobbies and there's a sharpshooter, your damage dealt increase usually gets overwritten. And for his equipment, if you're looking for a free weapon, I recommend the Searing Sword, which imbues your attacks with fire, and it has an 840 attack stat. It can be gotten from the coin exchange shop. Overall, it's pretty good, and if you're fighting a boss weak to fire, don't worry because the fire does overwrite his inherent ice element. But that's only if you're fighting a boss weak to fire. And secondly, I recommend the Ryugumaru. It imbues your attacks with thunder. It absorbs 15% of damage dealt by normal attacks, and at Limit Break 3, you unlock the third factor that reduces attack damage taken by 10%. It also has a 963 attack stat. This blade and sheath is pretty incredible, a thunder element as well as a lifesteal. If you can get your hands on this, run it, even if the boss is not weak to thunder. And that third factor is not really important, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But the extra attack stats for limit breaking might help you out. And for his last weapon, I recommend Hisui Kirin, which imbues your attacks with Earth. It gives you a 50% increase on normal attack AP recovery, and at max limit break you unlock that last factor, which increases your attack damage dealt by 15% when your skill chain is at 3 or more. This sword actually works incredibly well with Lasswell because he has no form of AP recovery on normals, so that second factor can help him out with that. And one of his talents is that he reduces his AP cost by 40% when his skill chain is at 3, and this sword increases attack damage dealt by 15% at skill chain 3, so you're actually supposed to use those together and do a lot more damage that way. And then as an accessory, I recommend the Hawkeye Charm, which increases your crit hit chance by 10% and gives you an extra 5% chance of causing stun. Critical hits can increase your damage output by a lot, and the extra chance of causing stun is also not too bad, especially not considering that Lasswell has ice elements on his attack, so he doesn't really need an elemental weapon to take advantage of that extra stun chance. And the Jinx necklace is also not a bad idea. And now moving on to battle skills, first up I recommend you run Exercising Storm because it's really fast, and most of the time you're going to use this as a combo opener. You could also use it as a type of AoE attack to kill smaller mobs. Then secondly, I recommend Tranquility because you can use it from range, and it's just very safe overall. And then lastly, Blade Flash Awaken, because this is your damaging move. And the reason why we're not running Mirror of Haze is because, like I said, it's practically the same thing as Tranquility, except Tranquility is a little safer. And a combo that you can run with him is pretty standard. You can do a normal attack into Exercising Storm, into Tranquility, into as many Blade Flashes as you can use. And you might have to charge assault some of the Blade Flashes because he steps backwards, so you need to get in close range again by charge assaulting those. Regardless, this does a lot of damage. It's his most damaging combo after all. And at skill chain 3, which is where Blade Flash is sitting, his AP cost gets reduced, so he can spam that a bit more. Okay, so seeing as how Lasswell is a pretty interesting buffer, he can buff both attack and damage, I thought about not running a sharpshooter in this party, so instead of that, first I recommend Miracle. She can buff crit rate for the entire party by 30%, and she has some insane damage output. I'm talking like Devil Claire, Winter Fidel levels, maybe even higher. But overall, she's just a really strong attacker, and seeing as how she uses Knuckles, she benefits from the full 45% attack buff that Lasswell can bring her. The only issue with these two together is that they can't really work on the hit counter. But as a third character in this party, I recommend Relia, who can buff the AP recovery rate for the entire party by 50%. She has a small HP regen, or I say small, it's actually pretty big, 5% per every 3 seconds, and she has Enraging Fairy Light, which buffs every character's attack stat. So seeing as how we don't have any AP recovery on normals here, I thought that Relia's increased AP recovery would come in handy here. On top of that, the HP regen can keep everybody at full health very easily, and the Fairy Light can buff Miracle's damage output to insane levels, especially on her rush. And it's not too bad for Lasswell either. And then lastly, to finish up our party, I recommend a Summer Miria. She can buff stun rate for the entire party by 15%, she increases single target damage by 10%, and she also increases the party's max HP by 20%, gives them anti-flinch, and reduces the amount of in-damage they take. So Summer Miria's main purpose here is to give everybody the increased stun chance, and a little earlier I was talking about how we have no way to build the hit count. Well, Summer Miria actually is pretty good when it comes to that with her aura wall, so she can help out with that. And she also brings a single target damage buff to the party. Relia does that too, but she does that on her rush, so whenever Relia's buff is down, we always have Miria's buff to come back to. Now, looking at this, I realized that this party is mostly based around Miracle instead of Lasswell, but he's still kind of important, I think. To summarize, Lasswell is pretty unique when it comes to being an attack buffer. Not only does he buff attack for the entire party, but he can also buff damage for the entire party, which is unheard of when it comes to attackers. And this means that he can fill some interesting roles when it comes to party building, like you sometimes don't even need to bring a sharpshooter because Lasswell can take care of it. He also has innate ice elements on 2 of his attacks, and this means that most of the time whenever you're fighting a boss that's weak to ice, you don't even need to bring an elemental weapon. You could just bring something else that increases your damage. Well, most of the time you are going to bring an elemental weapon because they do have some good buffs aside from the element. But it does mean that even if you don't have the Hyuga blade and sheath, you can still use him against bosses weak to ice. Unfortunately, the downside that I found with him is that he's incredibly slow, both in his movements, in his attack rate, and his rush gain also seems to be kind of lacking. He's incredibly good for a free character, rivaling even most of our gacha attackers. And if you're a fan of the character and you're wondering if he's actually usable, yes, he's very good. And that's it for the Lasswell guide. So they've put out an advance notice for what's going to happen tomorrow, and it turns out we're going to be getting the Valentine's event, which means another 3 characters, which means I can get started on those guides already. But among those 3 characters, 2 of which are attackers and 1 is a healer. We already have so many attackers and we're getting even more. This is crazy. I want more sharpshooters, man. I actually want to play with a ranged character every now and again. Oh well. Hope that was helpful, and I guess we'll see you all next time. Peace!